Mitakayares and my family, my tribe, my fellow travelers, we're on a journey together, aren't we? And we mean to discover what others may not want us to discover, but what they mean to hide is absolutely discoverable. We just have to open our eyes and move forward together. And don't worry, we've got each other's backs. And while you're doing that, if you would, like, subscribe, comment, I would be only too grateful. As I was saying, there's this thing going around right now. It's all the rage. All we talk about, all we focus on. It's not a pretty thing, although it is often used to produce the most astonishing life-affirming products. Conversely, it is often used to consolidate, coerce, and catastrophize. Power. The will to power. Who has it? Who doesn't? Who lies hemorrhaging in the gutter? Exploited by those who seek to exploit. A man named Marx talked and wrote at great length about this. No, not this Marx. Frankly, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. In a nutshell, he posited that those who control the means of production control society. That they keep the vast majority of us down and dirty, working for them. They are the elite, we are the masses. Power is held by a small dominant group over the much, much, much larger subordinate class. For Marx and his many disciples, it's all about the struggle for power. Now today we face an unprecedented dissolution of the traditional arbiters of power. In this country anyway. And a few other Western nations, Marx was convinced that universities, schools of all levels, the media, even the family, were simply branches of that small dominant group. That these institutions exist to keep the masses coerced. So if you take control of any of these groups, and imagine how giddy you would be if you could take control of all of them, then you become the dominant group. If enough of us wrest that control from the small group, then the large group assumes the power. Then the immense masses becomes the dominant group, and the previously elite become the small subordinate group. That's what Marx openly encouraged, the victory of the masses. And this is what's playing out across the nation. Right now, as I speak, the government and the military and the media, and most profoundly our universities and educational system, are giving the power that they previously had hoarded. They're giving it away to the constituents, the laborers, the proletariat, the masses. Now, that word that I just employed, hoarded, I'll get back to it. A comparatively few malcontents can get the entire board of directors of virtually any entity to absolutely, resolutely change their entire approach to the society it serves. Everywhere, every day, the chorus is the same. Well, this action or that person is not consistent with our values. And then the axe falls. The intoxicating notion driving this harvesting by metaphorical axe is simple. Power is handed back to the people. Actually, power is wrested by the people from the greedy, soul-sucking elite. The eternal struggle resolved. And believe me, I know there are many greedy soul suckers out there. Believe me, capitalism has no monopoly on greed. So maybe more to the point, the people, us, we assume our rightful positions as holders of the reins of power for the first time ever. And what follows is fairness, justice, equality, finally, happiness. That's the script. Except that this concept of the power struggle was played out already, again and again, and the immense masses did take control, which ironically led to an immediate power vacuum, because somebody had to be in control of those who thought they were in control. Somebody had to be calling the shots. So anyone who was found to be unfair, unjust, who pushed and promoted inequality in order to hoard all that power to themselves, anyone who is suspected of this, and anyone who is found to be standing in the way of happiness, or suspected that someday they would be standing in the way of happiness for the masses, well, they had to be put down, didn't they? Silenced. And they were. The obvious historical exemplar here is Soviet Russia and all the previously independent nations they forcibly subjugated to Marxist struggle for power worldview. Poland comes to mind. I used to live there. My wife hails from Poland. Our son was born there. Then there are others like Vietnam, Venezuela, and most egregiously, China. China is an economic powerhouse, sure. Absolutely. It's also killing and terrorizing its people. The Chinese government is killing and terrorizing its people. Those in ultimate control exploit the newly enormous dominant group. They play on fears, they play on guilt. They tell the newly dominant group that there are all these bad actors out there who need to be silenced because they obstruct our natural progress toward justice and happiness. They tell us who to silence and how to silence them, and if we don't cozy up to their dictates, then we know that we will end up being silenced. They tell this enormous group that they are dominant. But they're not. We can't even call it the same old story of those in ascendancy and those who are not, because this new hierarchy is held together by fear and brutal oppression. The hoarding, remember that word, is perpetuated as always by those in power. Those who hold power do not want to share it, do not intend to distribute it to the masses. This is particularly effective when the institutions that have traditionally been the bedrock of society, our churches, our communities, and most terrifyingly our families, are replaced by those few who seek to usurp them all. When Stalin becomes God, when there is no longer a moral and ethical absolute, when the only value is whatever the state tells you is valuable. And don't believe those actors who tell you that they uphold only the highest, most consistent values. Don't believe the newscasters and writers and celebrities and politicians and CEOs who are paying lip service to these so-called values of equity and justice, when these very same actors are actively courting the Chinese dollar. Who remain silent, or perhaps can manage to wag a finger at the murderous excesses of the Chinese government. These actors are only protecting their jobs. So what is the antidote to this? Free expression, free thought, free speech. And let's be honest about this. Free speech is free thought. In Soviet Russia, you had to discipline yourself to censor your thought process. Otherwise, you could slip. You may say the wrong word or rendezvous with the wrong person, or you could simply give the impression of wanting to use the wrong word by raising an eyebrow at an inopportune time, or walking with the wrong stride, or being related to the wrong person. The Soviets would take any measure, no matter how extreme, to finally realize that socially constructed utopia. Anything and everything to win the eternal class struggle. Then you were silenced. You were sent off to the camps and the prisons and the graves unless you learned to stop thinking independently and instead thought only what the state allowed you to think. Free speech is free thought. Free speech is free thought. Societies which champion free thought reap the benefits. Free speech is the only mechanism by which we proceed to the sincere and voluntary exchange ideas. If we are sincere in our free speech, we meet with others to share ideas, shape ideas, better each other. We move forward and upward. We progress. Free speech does not happen without free thought, which is what we'll talk about next time. Remember, please subscribe. It will mean the world to me. Peace, 4 fingers. Sorry, that's 8. Peace, 4 fingers. And be real good to yourselves.